Hello, this is Chek. Welcome back to yet another one of my many video blogs. Today I'm going to talk to you about a different topic. Our subject today is the importance of postural balance. Now there's two primary systems of muscles in the body. The tonic system, which is composed of the muscles used for posture and stabilization. The tonic muscles have a larger percentage of slow twitch muscle fibers, or muscle fibers that have an aerobic metabolism. Those muscle fibers are designed for long periods of work. The type 2A and type 2B muscle fibers are your faster muscle fibers that respond better to quick movements or heavy lifting. Those make up what is called the phasic system. Phasic meaning short bursts of movement versus tonic, which would be holding for a long period of time. The balance in those two systems is very, very important. And unfortunately, worldwide, exercise enthusiasts, strength coaches, therapists of all types have gotten so into the phasic system, which is largely the muscles you see in the mirror, at the expense of maintaining strength and conditioning and coordination in the tonic system, which, by the way, is well conditioned if you use a Swiss ball properly, which is one of the many ways I use a Swiss ball for enhancing postural function. To exercise these muscles correctly requires that you have a quite good awareness of the ability to manipulate acute exercise variables, which are rest periods, sets, tempo, and loads. Reps, sets, tempo, and intensity, or the amount of load on a given muscle, which is covered in my Correspondence course, Program Design, which is absolutely basic training for anyone designing an exercise program or even wanting to know how to design a program for themselves. Now, we're going to talk a little bit today about a test that I use and teach in my scientific back training program, and I give those kinds of concepts in scientific back training and give you exercises like the prone cobra to address this, since a lot of people don't have back extension machines readily available, or Russian glute ham machines, or things that can do the test that I'm going to show you called the Sorenson Test, so you can determine how well balanced your phasic system or your erectors relative to your transversospinal or your deep tonic stabilizer system in one specific regard as I'm presenting it here. Now, these kinds of tests are taught in great detail in Chek Exercise Coach, all the way up progressively more comprehensive and more regions of the body through the Chek level 1, 2, and 3, and 4 programs. Scientific back training gives you a whole manual that any of you, even an athlete, could and should study as a home study course, which has DVDs and a full manual with diagrams and explanations of tests and exercises, flexibility tests, all the things that anybody that's athletic or regularly exercises should probably know to avoid getting hurt doing the kinds of exercises that are popular today, especially with the boom of CrossFit, where people are going in and have significant imbalances, as I'll show you, in their structure. Those types of exercises, any quick movements, even your step classes and sculpt classes, almost all those things, even going out for a run, are all typically phasic dominant and produce sports or activity-specific muscle imbalance syndromes. So it's very, very important to understand how to incorporate exercises for strengthening the tonic or postural system, or you can run into trouble, and I will highlight some examples of that shortly. Now, when you stand on a plumb line for a postural assessment, so if there was a plumb line hanging here and you were looking at me relative to the plumb line, the space just in front of the ankle, the plumb line should hang about 1 centimeter in front of your ankle. So if you put your index finger in front of your ankle, I don't know if you can see that or not, but the plumb line should pass right in front of your ankle. It should bisect the middle of the knee, the hip, the shoulder, and the ear. So in natural upright posture, your ear, shoulder, hip, knee, and ankle should be in the same vertical plane. This should not be a posture that you hold. It should be your natural standing posture. That posture indicates relative balance between the tonic and phasic systems and or the flexor chain of muscles and the extensor chain of muscles. Those two systems also have to be in balance. They're commonly out of balance, and it comes at a lot of cost, both energetically, causes circulatory disruptions, soft tissue dysfunctions, and all sorts of degenerative and orthopedic problems related to postural dysfunction. So if you're looking at a plumb line, what you commonly see in people is any number of derivations. I've just shown two common ones here. If a person's head moves forward, such as sitting at a desk all day, and their back muscles get tired and they start hanging off the ligaments while typing on keyboards, and often desks are not set up properly. So what happens is you start getting overload in key areas of the spine. So for example, in someone with a desk, sitting at a desk, they're not using their hamstrings, they're not using their butt muscles, and they're not even using their lumbar extensors. They're usually slouching in the chair and hanging off their mid-thoracic extensors and cervical extensors. And as that muscle tension winds up, and because the eyes typically need to be level with the horizon for reasons of balance, the eyes, the ear, the inner ear or vestibular system, and the teeth, the occlusal plane, need to be maintained in a horizontal relationship, because developmentally we always needed to see where we were going, what we were hunting, and what was hunting us. The vestibular or balance centers have to be on that horizontal plane, because that's our neutral reference point. Just like a pilot's gyroscope has to have a zero reference point, or horizontal, or they don't know how many degrees they're turning, for example. So because the brain always wants to keep the eyes, ears, and teeth level with the horizon, as our body starts to fatigue, the head comes down and forward to maintain that horizontal gaze, which causes a progressive overload of the postural muscles. Two common reactions to these postural syndromes, which are also kicked off very frequently by wearing high-heeled shoes in women. The higher the heel goes, the more compensation you have in the system, which leads to all sorts of problems from high-heeled shoes, and I've treated thousands of cases of that. Typically what you see is the orange one shows that the knees come back, the hip usually migrates forward to the line, may stay on the line in some cases, but classically what you see is the tail tucking under, or the lumbar spine getting flatter, which increases the likelihood of a disc bulge. The thoracic spine has a natural curve called a kyphosis, but it becomes a hyperkyphosis, or an exaggerated kyphosis, and that's when we start hanging off the ligaments, which causes a lot of pain, often between the shoulder blades in people from sitting or even standing at long periods of time. For example, a mechanic or working over the fender of a car, or a dentist working on teeth. I've worked with lots of dentists with chronic back and neck pain, and mechanics, and doctors, and nurses, and mothers, and the list goes on. Another compensation is called the Kayfa Lordosis, which means that as the hips wander forward of the line, there's an increase in the lumbar curve, an increase in the thoracic curve, and the head comes down and forward. That causes shortening and tightening in the upper cervical region and in the low back, and lengthening and weakening through the middle back region, which disrupts the normal mechanical function of the joints, leading to a lot of problems in movement. And what's critical is either of these postures cause an increase in the thoracic curve, which locks up the thoracic spine so it does not rotate effectively. So people swinging golf clubs, throwing balls, playing sports where there's rotation involved, or even running, hitting a heavy bag, any of that kind of stuff, even using a shovel as a rotational activity, to the degree you have these increased curvatures and your thoracic spine locks up, you see overuse injuries in the shoulders, low back, and knees commonly, because those are the areas the body usually typically compensates first in, and that leads to a lot of people having surgeries and seeing therapists and doing all sorts of stuff that could easily have been corrected just by having a balanced exercise program, which requires a proper stretching program. In my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, I show you 20 key stretch tests to do so you can identify which exact muscles need to be stretched. I show you how to test your core and how to make all these corrections. And in scientific back training, I just show you more as it relates to the back and get more focused, and it's significantly more comprehensive than How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, which covers many different topics. Now, a very simple, first of all, before I show you this simple test, I want to point out that research that was presented in the book Occupational Biomechanics by Gunnar B.J. Anderson, they looked at blood flow studies through muscle, and they're looking at occupational hazards and people sitting improperly and having workspaces set up incorrectly. And they found that as little as 5% increase in muscle contraction. So if your arm's just hanging and you lift your shoulder, that can increase muscle tension easily by 5%. So whatever you could say, for example, doing a biceps curl as a maximum weight, only 5% of that contraction can reduce blood flow through that muscle by 50 to 75%. So if we have postural syndromes and we have areas that are working too hard and or heads hanging off of our necks or postural overload in key areas, those muscles contract to try to hold us up against gravity, but there's a significant reduction in blood supply to the muscles that need oxygen and nutrition, and waste removed, or the muscles become pathologic and develop things like trigger points, fibrous tissues. You get the release of what's called serofibrinous exudate when the muscles are trauma and the muscles start to get glued together. So you get all sorts of problems that create a lot of chronic pain in people. And pain is a thing that you don't want to overexpose yourself to. For example, Linus Pauling showed that when a person's in pain, they use about 20 times more vitamin C per hour than when they're not in pain. Now, there's probably many other studies by now, but the key thing, you don't want your body to be in unnecessary pain, and these kinds of pains can easily be fixed right at home. Now, I have had athletes come to me. I had, for example, one guy was a famous strongman who was a friend of Chuck Norris's, and Chuck Norris used to work with me a fair bit back in the day, and he referred this friend of his to me who was a famous Christian strongman who did strongman demonstrations. This guy was so strong he could take a steel frying pan and roll it on a counter like a burrito. He could take the Los Angeles phone book and rip it in half with his bare hands. This guy was about 6 feet tall, 320 pounds of muscle. He had some of these postural problems, so I applied a test to him, the Sorenson Test. On the Sorenson Test, if you get on a back extension bench or a Russian glute hand machine, or you can even use just a standard weightlifting bench, if you put a 55 centimeter or 45 centimeter foot Swiss ball under the feet and have a therapist or a trainer hold the feet down so the body can be kept horizontal, that's the key thing. If a person that has normal strength and conditioning in the tonic extensors of the back, the postural muscles, with their greater trochanter or their hip bone held in the midpoint or the axis of the cushion here, not forward, not backward, they should be able to hold horizontal with their arms at their side, not propped up anywhere, but arms at side. They should never drop below the horizontal plane. If you can hold that position for 4 minutes, research shows that you have pretty much optimal conditioning in your postural system. The shorter the time frame you can hold that, particularly relative to the kinds of weights you're lifting, the worse off you are and the more likely you are to have pain. I have had numerous powerlifters, bodybuilders, strength athletes. I've had men, probably at least a handful of men that could deadlift over 700 pounds that had terrible back pain, and many of them give the same kind of complaint. In fact, this big Christian strongman said, "Paul, I can't even brush my teeth without having to hold myself up on the counter because my back hurts so bad." But this is a guy that could easily have deadlifted 700 or more pounds. His arms were as big as my thighs. Well, when I applied the Sorenson test to him, he lasted 18 seconds. I would say that most of the strength athletes I work with last less than 30 to 35 seconds, but they should be able to last 4 minutes just for normal strength. And remember, the more mass you have, i.e. bodybuilder, weightlifter, the more you have to hold up in a field of gravity. And the more your imbalance between the tonic and phasic system grows, the more problems you have with joint stability and dynamic joint control. So this is a very simple example of a test that you can run with a trainer or even at home fairly simply if you have someone to help you, or you have a back extension bench at a gym you can use. And to the degree that you cannot hold that is the magnitude by which you need the exercise. So the test becomes the exercise. If you fail the test and you cannot hold for 4 minutes, then the way you use it as an exercise, and I recommend doing this at the end of a workout program, you never want to exhaust stabilizer muscles before you begin a workout program, or your risk of injury goes through the roof. At the end of the program, you would do the test, and you would keep a stopwatch in your hand, and when you can't hold horizontal and start dropping below, stop the stopwatch. Whatever your total work time is, you will rest for 50% of the work time. So if you hold 1 minute, your rest period is 30 seconds. If you hold 2 minutes, your rest period is 1 minute. Work yourself up, starting off with just 1 set, because it can make your muscles quite sore. Build yourself up to at least 3 sets. Practice that every other day, unless you have too much muscle soreness, then go to a day on and 2 days off. Build yourself up till you can hold that with good alignment for 4 minutes, and you will find that a lot of the pain you get working over counters, being a dental hygienist, a mechanic, a mother holding on to children, or leaning over a counter to prepare food, a lot of that pain will disappear, provided you're not making the imbalance worse. I talked in my last blog about the crunch. If people keep doing too many crunches, they pull themselves down and forward into this position and induce these kind of imbalances. And you can tell when someone is doing the right amount of pulling exercises or extension exercises relative to flexion exercises, because their posture always tells the truth of the balance of their exercise program. That's that simple. So if you want to learn more about these kinds of things, you can go to www.chekinstitute.com. There you can see a wide variety of comprehensive correspondence courses with DVDs, manuals, well illustrated, clearly outlined. Those basic courses are the prerequisites to get into courses like Chek Exercise Coach, and you can progress up through the program as far as you'd like to go. It's a comprehensive program that's designed to teach people to be true masters. It's a multidisciplinary program, so you could be in a class with a medical doctor, physical therapist, chiropractor, osteopath, and in the same class you can have strength coaches, personal trainers, dance and movement educators, massage therapists, nurses, podiatrists, you name it. My interest is not having territorial pissing contests. It's to teach us all the basic things we all need to learn to be healthy. And since we got about 7 billion people on the planet, most of which are sick with poor posture, that don't exercise or don't know how to exercise, I'd say it's a great day for all of us to get it right and share the love, baby. So that's my little blog for you today. The Sorenson Test, 4 minutes. Balance the tonic postural systems and the phasic dynamic systems. Do the stretch test in my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. Once you get yourself balanced, then you can start playing more. If you're looking for a more staged program that takes you through the key stages of stabilizer reconditioning, progressing into strength training and power training, there's a great model of that in my book, The Golf Biomechanics Manual. Don't worry about the title. The first 3 programs go through the stabilization concepts and progressively develop you. There's a more comprehensive assessment system in there for deciding or determining which muscles are too tight relative to other muscles that are too loose. There's lots of excellent mobilizations and neuromuscular exercises for improving flexibility in joints in that book. That's the Golf Biomechanics Manual. In basic, it applies to everybody. It's only the more advanced stages in that book that are golf specific. So there you have several resources. If you want to look up information on how the postural system works, a very good book that was one of the books to first show the EMG, electromyographic recording results of postural activity in the human body, is called Muscles Alive by Basmajian. You can learn how when the body is standing upright, there's very little muscular activity at all. But as soon as your posture starts to break down, You get all these tension syndromes, muscle syndromes, chronic pain syndromes, and those lead on to things like fibromyalgia and all sorts of stuff that none of you want to have to endure, and it's unnecessary. So, hey, let's get together and eat, move, and be healthy. I'll see you on my next blog. Thanks for joining me today. ChekInstitute.com. I'm Paul Chek.